In this episode, we look at the final 4 of 12 project management principles. Hello, welcome back to the Project Management Podcast at pm-podcast.com. I'm Cornelius Fichtner, and this is episode 479, and just like the last 2 episodes, this one is part of my PMP exam prep course called the PM PrepCast, and it was recorded live on YouTube and Facebook. And for the third and final time, please do take a look at these important and foundational principles that come from our course, even if you are already PMP certified or never will be. They will help you make better decisions on your projects. Lastly, this is a video episode, and if you are not seeing the video, then please do visit pm-podcast.com/479. Here we go. Today, as you can probably guess, we want to take a look at the last 4. We begin with complexity, where we will learn and see that limiting effects of systems interaction is important. Then we talk about risk, because reducing risk helps project success. Then we want to be designing processes so that we can be nimble and adaptable. And obviously, every project brings change, and we want to ready everybody for that particular change. Yeah, so those are the 4 principles we're going to look at today. Hello, once again, everybody. Before we get started, though, I want to make it absolutely clear that we're following the PMBOK guide, 12 principles, and obviously we're using sort of the same language, but this here is not a rehash or even a derivative of what you can find in the PMBOK guide, right? Because this is all based on our own research and our own article. Here is the article. It is the 12 project management principles explained by experts. So we went above and beyond the PMBOK guide. In this article, we've taken those 12 principles as a starting point and then found experts to help us explain them. And you will hear from those experts throughout today's presentation. Here is our agenda. First of all, just a quick one. The PMBOK guide is in truth 2 documents. And the principles we're looking at, they're not actually part of the PMBOK guide, and I'll show you exactly what I mean. Then we're going to review principles 9 to 12, and just like in the last 2 sessions, get ready to participate. And I'm going to ask you a few poignant questions about how these particular principles apply to you if you're joining me here live, and that's going to be very good with some interaction and some help from everybody. At the end, the usual take action, where I tell you what you might want to do next and some takeaways that you may want to do, want to know for the exam. Before we jump into everything, please don't forget that we do offer a full suite of PMP exam prep products. On the left, the PrepCast training course at pmprepcast.com or projectmanagementprepcast.com if you want the long URL. And then on the right, the PrepCast Simulator at pmexamsimulator.com. These 2 products together will get you to the PMP exam. You'll get your 35 contact hours, and you'll be able to apply your knowledge to over 2,000. How many is it now? 200 questions, I think. Don't quote me on it. I don't even know how many we have. We keep adding more and more. So here we go. Agenda item number 1 for today, the 12 principles that we have and that we've talked about or will be talking about 4 more. They're not actually coming from the PMBOK guide. They are coming from the standard for project management, the ANSI standard for project management. So on the right-hand side, you see this here for illustrative purposes, a picture that I've taken from the PMBOK guide. The white box, that is the standard for project management, and the somewhat purplish box, fuchsia, I don't know what that color is below, the big one, that is actually the PMBOK guide, the project management body of knowledge. The principles, as you can see here, they are here at the top. These here are the 12 principles, whereas down here in the PMBOK guide, you actually have 8 performance domains. Just an interesting thing to remember, that the principles are not actually in the PMBOK guide. They are part of the ANSI standard. All right, and with that quick clarification out of the way, let's get going with the next 4 principles: complexity, risk, adaptability, and change, beginning with complexity, where we talk about limiting the effects of system interaction. So to start with the basics, most projects are complex, and you want to address this complexity by using the team's knowledge, by using the team's experience, and also lessons learned. Complexity, that is the state, or if you want, quality of being intricate, of being complicated, and obviously there are many factors which will influence the project's complexity. And let's take a look at some examples here that I have on here. I don't think that any of these that are slowly coming up here are going to be a big surprise to you. And that's because, generally speaking, these factors here, they influence the complexity on many projects. So they are important areas to understand for our work as project managers and project leaders. And as you can see there at the bottom right, I am looking for your input already. So for those of you who are joining me live on Facebook and YouTube, what are some examples on what influences the complexity on your projects? Please do type them into the chat and I will bring them up. And while you do that, let's briefly review what we have already here on the screen. So uncertainty, the biggest uncertainty is often about the actual scope of the project. In particular, if you have a discovery project where you're really trying something new, right? Then also technology is something where new technologies will lead to complexity. We have multiple stakeholders and multiple partners there on the right-hand side. There is a joke that says, only on a project with one stakeholder, yourself, will you not have any conflict or complexity. And so as soon as we have multiples, then that is it. We also have interdependencies on multiple systems. Then there are new territories, new markets, right? So that is all of that. I'm looking at some of the comments that are coming in, more about, thank you very much, about the quality of my training. I appreciate that very much. Okay, that wasn't the question, but thank you. Thank you very much. I have another fun for you when it comes to complexity. And that is the government. The government adds complexity to our projects. Think of Europe, GDPR, data privacy. Makes every IT project a little bit more complex because you have to make sure that you keep the personal data of people safe. And of course, if you are a construction project manager, you will be all too familiar with building codes, electrical codes, and things like that. So there's a complexity added to that. Okay. Tayo has one: impact of the outcome of the project. Exactly. So that can add complexity to what you're doing. So you're adding complexity to your organization with your project. And I think that ties it nicely into principle number 12, which is change management. And we'll look at that in a little bit. Okay. We always have quotes and statements from our experts. And I have 2 quotes for you today. Both are from Mohit Jain. The first one is this one here. Understanding complexity helps make a proposal or contract comprehensive with adequate consideration for possible risks and their mitigation, as well as for deciding on the contract type, right? And when you understand the level of complexity on your project, you can then decide on the proper project management methodology and make the decision whether to choose waterfall, agile, or hybrid. So knowing the complexity, understanding the complexity means you can then decide, what is the type of contract we're using? What is the type of methodology, the delivery approach that we are choosing? And you need to really understand what the complexity is that you have. If we go back here, right, uncertainty at the top left. If you have a project with uncertainty, you will most likely go with probably an agile approach, right? If you have little uncertainty, if you need to be certain, then a plan-driven approach is probably better. So understanding that will help very much. The second quote from Mohit Jain here is this: bringing together knowledge of the project, the team's experience, and any other learning will help you minimize the impact of complex issues. It helps in deciding the proper governance framework and in identifying the right service providers. Yes, service providers, important. If you know that this is something really complex, you probably want somebody with a lot of experience. We have another one coming in here from Jenny Ramirez. Managing virtual teams does indeed not maybe add to the complexity of your system, but adds to the complexity of the leadership approaches, the project management approaches that you have to choose during the project. Yes, of course. All right. Now, what does this look like in practice? Here are some situational examples of what complexity principle looks like in practice. My question for you here: how do you address complexity with your team? Once again, please, your answers in the chat are very welcome. Let's take a look at what we have here. So first of all, making sure that the right people with good levels of expertise are invited to participate. Just like we saw a moment ago with the service provider, if you have an inexperienced service provider versus or an inexperienced team member, well, those are not the right people. You want to create a culture of continuous learning. If everybody is ready to learn and grow and learn and grow, that means you can reduce complexity over time. You want to look for and expect complexity and then make a plan to address it head on when you find a complex problem. You can also break things down. Like if you have a massive, huge project that feels overwhelming, well, break it down into micro projects, sub projects that feel manageable. Work breakdown structure here comes to mind, obviously. And lastly, prioritizing regular team huddles and using collaboration software to ensure smooth communication here. All right. So far, no comments about what you do in order to address complexity on your team. So let us move on to this photograph, to this image here. And if you've watched the previous two lessons, you may remember this image here because I used it for the fifth principle, holistic thinking. And I don't often reuse images, but this one here I have a point because I'm reusing it. I want to make a very similar point as I did with holistic thinking. You need to take a step back. Okay, it is true, not all projects are complex, but most organizations are, right? Companies are complex, and therefore it is highly likely that you will eventually work in a complex environment at some point in your career. And understanding the complexity principle will help you apply it in practice. So do take a step back from your project. Look at it from a 10,000 foot perspective. That's 3,000 meters, something like that. So 3K up, right? So you really want to go far away. And if you combine, the holistic thinking, understanding the complete system, but also understanding the various trees, and at the same time also wondering, now where is complexity? Now you're merging two principles into one by taking a step back. All right. So do take a step back, review the situation as a whole, look at things that might be helpful for you to understand as the project leader. That's it for our review of the first of 4 principles today. I do have a PMP exam sample question for you here as well. Let's go. During one of the sprint planning meetings, the product owner raises a concern that emerging technologies might impact the project during one of the upcoming sprints. If this happens, project complexity will significantly increase, negatively affecting project objectives. What is the best strategy for the Scrum Master to employ regarding this particular project complexity? Is it A, regularly review the state of emerging technologies and evaluate the impact? B, provide the team members with training on all emerging technologies? C, use the critical path method to increase flexibility in the project schedule? Or is it a D, adopt an iterative and incremental project management framework? A, B, C, or D? For those of you joining me live, please type A, B, C, or D into the chat. I'll give you about 15 seconds. For those of you who are watching this recorded, just press pause if you need more time. Okay, so we're getting a few answers here in the chat. We have Pankaji who says A. We have the little cube 88 with D. We have more A's coming in here, right? Okay, so got a few people with A's, got one person with a D. The correct answer here is, in fact, A. Regularly review the state of emerging technologies and evaluate the impact, right? So technological innovation can indeed disrupt the market and add complexity to projects that target those markets. For example, new technology can emerge at any point during the project and threaten the objectives. And to address the threat proactively, your team should regularly review any emerging technology and adapt the project accordingly. So as a project leader, it is our job to evaluate and look at complexity regularly and really understand what is going on and keep our finger on the pulse of technological innovation, right? That's truly important. Here is the important part about this particular scenario here, right? And the sample question. The scenario does not say if the new technology is already available on the market and if it will indeed negatively affect the project. We don't know that yet. All that the product owner did was raise a concern and point to the horizon here, right? Might impact, will significantly if this happens, right? So these are all these ifs, right? And that is why in this particular situation here, we do not want to take any action without first analyzing and understanding the potential impact of this new technology. However, the project team should be proactive and monitor the market for any other emerging technology as well that might also potentially impact the project. So if technological innovation that might impact the project is identified, then we evaluate this new technology and we adapt the project for the new environment accordingly. Okay. And by the way, somebody answered, said D might be the correct answer. Now, in this particular case, add an iterative and incremental project management framework. We already know because in the question it said Scrum Master, so it's probably already agile. There's probably already something there. It might be a potential answer, but we really don't know if that is the right thing. It's kind of a knee-jerk reaction. Oh, let's change our project management approach because there might be a additional or there might be new emerging technology that could disrupt us, right? What is the first thing that you ought to be doing, right? And adding a different or changing your project management methodology would probably be the last thing that you do when emerging technologies comes around. All right, we are moving on here. We're moving on to the 10th of the 12 principles. Risk, reducing risk for project success is the overall title for this one here. When it comes to risk, we want to optimize. We want to optimize our risk responses, right? And the important word here is risk responses, okay? This is where I want to bring up Dr. David Hilson. He's known as the risk doctor. I did an interview with him once, and I have a link to you at the end of this lesson, where he said, we project managers, we're really good about planning risk. We're really good about quantifying and qualifying risk and doing Monte Carlo analysis and all of that. But then we totally and utterly fail. Okay, I may be exaggerating a little bit here. We're not so good when it comes to actually implementing risk responses. Let's do something about that, okay? And he was a big proponent of we need to work on our risk responses, okay? And by adding and by following these particular principles, you, I, and also PMI, we acknowledge that the most important thing about risk management is the risk response. What do we do about it? The fact that we have 25 risks neatly, ordered by risk, probability, and impact, well, that's nice, but what are you going to do about it? That is the big question that we have. So according to Dr. David Hilson, risk is uncertainty that matters, and there's typically a lot of uncertainty on a project because we're usually trying to do something new here, trying to change things. It's important for us to be aware and to actively manage these risks to bring a little bit more certainty to the work. And here's a tip for you, especially for PMP focus. This is based on my experience as a PMP trainer and reading lots of lessons learned. Risk-related questions come up frequently on exams, so make sure your preparation includes adequate coverage of this topic. In fact, some people even say that project management means we reduce risk on the project. That's just it, right? That's our primary job. And that, in fact, every single one of these 12 principles you can sort of relate back to risk. For example, stewardship, you reduce the risk. If you apply good stewardship, you reduce the risk of wasting company resources. Leadership, well, it reduces the risk of us going in the wrong direction there. And looking ahead to the principle that we'll review in a few minutes here, that is change, right? Risk management means reducing the risk of the impact of change. So you could do that for every single one of these 12 principles and do it this way. So yes, risk is important both on real projects and also in your PMP exam preparation. Here's our next quote from our expert, Harry Hall. Project managers, he says, typically manage multiple projects containing numerous and diverse stakeholders. And project risk management helps us and our teams to deal with competing demands and stay focused on the things that really matter most. Optimizing risk responses can also prepare you for worst case scenarios. When you're well aware of the risk aheads, you can then take steps now to reduce the possibility of encountering threats in the future. And risk analysis essentially helps in the planning stage. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about risk analysis, and the question being, where do you get started with optimizing your risk responses, right? And this is a suggestion, again, that comes from Harry here. He says, one powerful priority setting method for risk analysis is the probability and impact assessment matrix. And here's how to use it. First, you want to rate the probability of the risks that you have identified. And most often this is done on a scale from 1 to 5, right? Is the risk a low risk 1? Is it a high risk? Then it is a 5. Second, you want to rate the impact of the risk using the same scale, 1 to 5. And now you multiply those two scores together, right? So if you have, say, a probability 4, impact 3, that gives you a total score of 12. Now you can sort the list of risks that you have, and you can then use a risk threshold to determine which risks merit a response. For example, all risks that are with a score of 20 or higher are urgent risks, and you need to look at them. Here on this particular matrix, you can see that we have green, yellow, and red risks, and the red risks, those would be the ones that you are going to look at in detail and manage and assign risk owners and do all those things. But this is only an example, right? On your project, there might be fewer red squares, or there might be a lot more red squares. It all depends on your how risk is seen in your organization, right? How much risk you are willing to take or not willing to take. So you have to manage more or less. And that totally depends on the project. And in this way, we develop the habit of concentrating on the risks that matter most. And at that point, you'll get more done than any 2 or 3 other project managers around you, because you know your risks and you focus on the right things. All right, what does this look like in practice? My question to you, what does risk management look like in practice for you directly? What software do you use to manage your risk? Do you just use a piece of paper? Do you use an Excel table or something like that? Or do you have an actual risk management software? Do you use Monte Carlo analysis, for example? All right, so what do we have here? So first of all, carrying out risk analysis using the process that we looked at with Harry, right? That allows you to make decisions based on the risk project and the risks on your project and your project overall, understanding kind of what your risk profile is. Then you want to help the team and the executives understand what a risk is and what risky situations might come up on your particular project. And you also want to make smart choices about risk responses and really select the best possible result for both positive and negative risks. Optimizing the risk responses, that's really core to this principle, right? We're coming back to Dr. Hilson's, you've got to be focused on the risk responses. Make sure you understand what options are available to you and for these risk responses, and have a process for choosing the best way forward. All right, I'm not getting any responses here in the chat today, so unfortunate. All right, in that case, we are moving on to the next PMP exam sample question that I have for you from our exam simulator. As part of a periodic risk review, the steering committee members expressed concern about a significant risk that the project team missed identifying while planning the previous sprint. At the following sprint planning meeting, the project manager and team devise an appropriate, cost-effective, and realistic response plan and assign a risk owner. What else should the project manager do? Is it A, implement the planned risk response, B, record the risk response and owner in the issue log, gain an agreement by relevant stakeholders is C, and then finally D, submit a change request to revise the risk register. Okay, is it A, B, C, or D? I'll give you 15 seconds. Please type it into the chat. All right, we're almost ready. I would like to say thank you to Jenny Ramirez, because Jenny answered my previous question. What software do you use? So Jenny uses Excel. I think Excel is probably one of the tools that most of us use, some sort of a spreadsheet software, right? Okay, we got questions, answers coming in. B, D, C, B, D. So we're a bit all over the place here. No real agreement that I can see. The correct answer in this particular case is C. Gain agreement by relevant stakeholders. Here's why. A risk should have an appropriate and cost-effective and realistic response plan with an assigned risk owner. Okay, that much we agree upon. The risk response should also be approved by the relevant stakeholders so that it can be implemented immediately if the risk is realized. In this particular scenario here, the element that was missed was the agreement by the relevant stakeholders. Let me expound a little bit on this one here, okay? So to maximize the positive impact of risks and minimize their adverse effect on the project, we project leaders, we have to continually evaluate exposure to risk, both threats and opportunities. In this scenario here, after missing to identify a significant risk, the project manager and the team devises a response plan. And risk responses should be appropriate for the significance of the risk, cost-effective, realistic, within the project context, and agreed upon by relevant stakeholders and owned by a responsible person. Most of the effective risk response plans attributes are adequately addressed in this scenario here. Right? The only missing element truly is the agreement, which may include the steering committee members. Okay, so let me quickly talk about B and C here as well. So B was record the risk response and owner in the issue log. Let me bring this up again for you, a little bit bigger here. Record the risk response and owner in the issue log. That is incorrect, because if it said in the risk register, it would be correct. The issue log is not where you record a risk. That's where you record an issue. A risk is something that may happen in the future, a potential future issue. An issue is a risk that has now become an issue. It's happening. We have this problem here, right? So we're using this here to kind of guide you in the wrong direction, right? You don't record this in the issue log. A risk is recorded in the risk register. Okay, so then why is D wrong, right? Why is submit a change request to revise the risk register? D is wrong because the risk register is usually not under configuration control. You don't have to get approval to change the risk register. Just imagine you need to change a risk level. You need to reassign a risk owner. Every time you make a change to the risk register, you need to get approval from somebody to do that. You do not need to submit a change request to make an update in a risk register. So that's why B and D are incorrect. All right, we are moving on to principle number 11, adaptability. Here, this is all about designing processes so that you can be nimble, so that you can be agile. And so if you look at the pandemic, right, ever since 2020, many organizations put adaptability and resilience front and center, and for project teams being able to switch paths, deliver faster, bounce back after a setback. This is crucial for ensuring that projects are completed to the customer's satisfaction. All right, so being adaptable, being resilient. This is a big tenet, obviously, of agile project management, but now it is at the forefront of everybody's thinking. Our quote here is from Emma Ruth Arnas Pemberton. She is a PMI volunteer in the UK, also a PMO expert. She says, PPM, project portfolio management practices, are evolving all the time. And whether you are in delivery or enabling functions, you should be ready to change alongside the organization to continue to add value and deliver successful and beneficial changes. So it's up to you to be resilient and adaptable. Things will change around you. You just have to get used to the fact that this is constantly happening. So we need to be able to really go with the punches, so to speak. A huge part of being able to adapt to any circumstances comes from resilience, and resilience of the individual, resilience of the team, and resilience of your organization as a whole. All right, but what if you think that you need to work on your team's ability to respond to change? Where do you start? Okay, and here is one idea and a tip from Emma Ruth, and she says developing and fostering resilience and an adaptable mindset takes input from everyone on the team. Okay, so I think it was back in Principle 2 about team that we learned if something is developed in isolation and then just here, follow this, you must follow this particular rule, then values, culture, things like that, they won't stick. So you want to ensure that this kind of work is taken seriously, developed in a safe environment and in a collaborative way, right? Once it is developed, you foster a culture of innovation through events where community members can engage and share, as well as to committing to the plan. Okay, so you want to get your team's input, you want to have your team work on their own adaptability and their own resilience. And are you starting to see something emerge here, right? And these principles that we are looking at and have looked at, you cannot look at them in isolation. They form a whole. Adaptability, that's what we're talking about right now, that takes the team. Understanding complexity requires holistic thinking, and leadership just permeates everything, right? I think you get it, right? These work hand in hand. These are not intended to be just, oh, I'm just going to use adaptability and I'll be fine. No, no, no. You have to mix and match and use this as a whole continuously. Okay, what does this look like in practice? All right, I wanna see if I can get you out of your shell here. So now we're talking about resilience. And please go ahead. Tell me how you would rate your current project team in regards to their adaptability and their resilience. Give me a number from 1 to 10 in the chat here. 1, they couldn't change if their life depended on it, so really bad. My team is slow to change, really hard to get them to change, to adapt, to be resilient. Or number 10, right? We can change the whole project and they will just go with the punches and continue. Not a problem at all. So 1 to 10, I'd like to see your estimate of your team's resilience in the chat. So this principle is all about being able to flex with the situation, bounce back where things are tough. And this is really a great skill to have. But what does it look like, right? What does it truly look like? So creating a learning plan for the team so that they have technical skills that is required to deliver this project and the next one. And many of you are already coming in. We have an 8 here, we have a 7 here, we have a 9 here. We have Tony with a 6. So, 7, 8, 9, that's very high. 6, you might want to think about doing some team development here, Tony. You want to listen to stakeholders and being prepared to change the approach or the outcomes if that is the best solution for the client or the organization, right? Make sure that you're still delivering what you're supposed to deliver, what is valuable. And again, we're now combining value, the principle of value, into this one as well. You want to lead by example. You want to model resilient behavior, such as taking a lunch break and finishing work on time. So much of what resilience means and being able to bounce back means, your own personal time management and taking care of yourself first, because you cannot just continue to work 24/7 around the clock. And it is your job as a project leader, as a scrum master, if you prefer, to model that behavior and be in front of the team and show them that this is the way that we do things here. And you want to reiterate the value of the project and always remind your team about the value that you are trying to build. All right. So we've had an 8, a 7, a 9, a 6, and we also have Honest Mezinier here who says 5. I apologize, by the way, if I mispronounce everyone's name here today. All right, so this is it in practice. Think about your own team a little bit. Where are they? And how can I get them to become more resilient in practice by following these 4 examples here. All right, building resilience is quite a personal thing, right? It starts with you, it starts with the individual team member, and then grows into the team, grows into the organization. And so the best advice to consider is, how well equipped do you feel at the moment with regards to your personal resilient levels? And then brainstorm some steps to implement to help you to bolster your resilience, and maybe you can then apply that to your team as well. Adaptability is the same. The easiest way to apply this in practice is to be open to change. And while change is tough, it is often in the best interest of the project. If you can adapt to changing business needs, you can improve the changes of success. Resilience can be taught, and it should be considered a key skill for the PPM practices, the portfolio practices of the future, says Emma Ruth Arnaz Pemberton. So if you feel that your team is not really all that resilient, it can be taught. Figure out a way of doing it. Get them to be adaptable, get them to be resilient, bring them into the agile mindset of change is inevitable. All right, we're moving on to another PMP exam sample question. Here it is. An agile leader has been tasked with putting together a team for a complex software development project with an aggressive schedule, planned to be completed in 6 months using an adaptive development approach. Most of the team members will be hired externally, and the remaining members will be brought from within the performing organization. What hiring strategy will support the teams and the project's adaptability and resilience? So here we're talking about the people, right? What people do we need? Number A, select individuals with broad skill sets, as well as experts with knowledge in each required skill area. Is it B, choose team members with extensive knowledge of change control processes and procedures? Is it C, identify each required skill area and select the team member that has the best qualification for that area? Or is it D, seek team members who will be able to complete the project in 4 instead of 6 months? I'll give you 15 seconds. Please type A, B, C, or D into the chat. All right, here we go. I have one more answer to the previous question. 8. This is how resilient Ravisa's team is at the moment. In terms of answers, A, B. We have one B here. We also have a T. T-type skills. Pankaj, I am getting to that. Good catch. Very good catch here. And we have another B here. All right. So the correct answer is indeed A, right? Having team members with extensive knowledge in each required field and area might be necessary for a complex software development project, as we have here. However, individuals that are highly skilled in a particular area, but also have a broad range of skills and experience provides more flexibility and enhances the team and the project's ability to resilient. Right. So this is all about the concept of generalizing specialists, okay? And I do talk about this particular one in the lesson on team training, where we talk about T-shaped skills, right? And this is what Pankaj said earlier on. T-type skills, right? So you want somebody with a broad skill set, but also a deep knowledge of a particular area, right? So that's what this T-shape means here. Okay, there are other shapes. There are eye-shaped, pie-shaped, comb-shaped, even, right? But we want those that are T-shaped indeed. So yes, we project leaders, we have to embrace adaptability and resilience in order to obtain optimal results. As a reminder, adaptability refers to the ability to respond to changing conditions, and resilience is the ability to absorb impact and recover quickly from a setback or a failure. If you have managed at least 2 projects, then you know that challenges and setbacks, they're frequently encountered during the project lifecycle. So adaptability, resilience will help you keep the project moving forward. Okay. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So maybe a little more here, right? So in this scenario that we described, the agile leader wants to select project team members in order to enhance the team's and the project's ability and resilience. And adaptability will be particularly important because agile teams collaborate closely to complete the project deliverables, whereas they would be more likely to have tasks assigned to them if you are the project manager if a plan-driven project. And again, if you have managed at least 2 software projects, then you know that you need subject matter experts, developers, designers, webmasters, and so on. It is much, much better if all of these team members also have a broad range of skills, right? If you have a developer, a designer, a tester, and that's all they can do, they don't have this broad T-shape, then they can't switch jobs. What if there is a blocker in QA, right? If you have a designer who understands, who understands a little bit about testing and has that experience in testing, now you can say, Madam Designer, would you please help us over here in QA and do a little bit of testing and help us get through this current blocker here? So that's why we want the people who have the T shape in their skill set, right? To give us additional support and keep the project on track. All right. That's it for our 11th principle, adaptability. We are moving on to the 12th principle, change. Change is coming. Yes, we know that. That's why we are project managers. That's our job. And we want to make sure that everyone is ready for the change that is coming, right? Change management is about setting up people to succeed, especially those who are going to be impacted by the change. Project management is all about delivering this change, whether that is to a service, a product, a technology, a process. People are at the heart of these, and that's why this principle is important to our practice of project management. Think about it this way. If everything in your project were perfect and nothing needed to change, you wouldn't have a job, right? We are agents of change. The reason why companies hire us to lead and manage projects is something has to change from state A to state B, and it's our job to get the company there and implement that particular change. All right? That's our job. So, to ensure the change is able to be absorbed and embedded long after the project has completed delivery, change management should be incorporated from the beginning of the project. This is what Bhushan Anur says right? And a tip to integrate change management into your project planning activities is to have a well-defined response, or rather well-defined responses to common questions at the beginning of your project. For example, right now, even though I'm in the middle of recording one of these lessons, the PrepCast training course that this lesson is going to be part of has not been launched yet. We are still working on the minimum viable product. But from where I'm sitting right now, it's exactly a week to launch date. And in the past 2 weeks, we thought about what are all the questions that our customers will ask us. And I have created an FAQ specific for the launch of this lesson and all the other lessons that we have in our new PrepCast. Okay, so having this FAQ, being able to answer these change questions that are coming ahead of time, and being able to proactively answer those questions that are of what is coming, that is an important thing to do. That's how change management begins. It'll also give you an opportunity to go, yeah, how are we going to do this exactly? Right? So ask yourself this here. Bouchard recommends that you ask yourself these questions, yeah, at the pre-business case stage, and then incorporating them into the business case. First of all, what is the change? Right? What exactly are we doing? Why is this necessary? Why are we doing this change? And how will it impact those who are affected? And I think this is also important. What if we don't do anything? Right? What will be the consequences if the change does not go ahead? Right? In this regard, it's a good idea to remember the third principle that we reviewed in this series. And this is the one about where we learned about engaging stakeholders and how that brings success. So put yourself into the shoes of your stakeholders as best as you can, right? It's not, you cannot 100% assimilate the stakeholder role, but you can do the best you can. You will learn a lot about your stakeholders. You will begin to understand them. What are their fears? What are the expectations? Where could the pushback come from in regards to the change that you are trying to implement? That's what you want to do and where you want to go, right? Let's not forget, it's also important to consider how people will be supported through the change and after the change. Here, Bouchard recommends communication, training, user guides, change champions as options for making sure that your changes stick. Let's take a look at a few examples. And I do have another question for you. Okay. My question for you is this: how many pages long is your change management plan? Okay, and I do have a point with this particular question. So please type into the chat, how many pages is it long? Is it 0? Like, I don't have a change management plan. Or is it, oh, I have a 35-page long change management plan? Give me your best guess in regards to what it is that you have. So some situational examples here of where change management is an important principle to use in your projects during a time of organizational change and transition, right? Things like mergers and acquisitions, even office closures, right? When two departments merge into one, or two companies merge into one. Help your team understand new processes and software to improve adoption and use of the new ways in working. And when your organization is changing something that affects, that is outside, like construction projects near residential housing, right? So that's where we have a situation where change management becomes really important. And you also want to help team members to easily voice their concerns about the change, to give the team reassurance that you're for and with them through the transition process. So how many pages long is your change management plan? I have One answer from Jenny, 2 pages, but changes on the project we are about to take. Well, Jenny, let me put it this way. You are probably ahead of many that are here, right? By having 2 pages of a change management plan, you have a change management plan. And that's the important bit. You think about it, right? We have Iffy here with 20 pages. We have Tony, 1 page. You know, that's good enough if that is adequate to your project. Now, don't think that Pankaj's 10 to 15 pages is better than Tony's with 1 or Jenny's with 2. If you have one that is tailored to your project, that is the whole point. You want a change management plan. The principle of change management is something that you will find useful over and over and over again. As projects deliver change, you are probably changing something, no matter how small this is, in your organization. And keep this as one of the basic principles of project management in mind, and you'll find it easier to encourage others to use whatever it was that your team delivered, right? And the earlier on you can do this, start from the very beginning, right? As soon as, the project is launched, begin talking to people about the change and what is coming and how you can help them, and try to understand where they are currently at. So the sooner you think and work on project change management, the better. Okay. And Tony is absolutely right. I believe our brain's capacity is limited. Our brains don't like change. And this takes me back to the previous principle about resilience, adaptability, right? This is where we have to train ourselves, Tony. But I totally agree. Sometimes I'm like, I don't want to change, okay? Stupid little thing. The BBC recently decided that their podcasts are no longer going to be available publicly. You have to download the BBC iPlayer, right? I used to listen to BBC podcasts just on my phone, on my podcast player here, right? Now I had to install the BBC iPlayer in order to listen to them. I don't like that change, frankly. I think it's stupid, but BBC decided that that's a change. So yes, I am sometimes also not adaptable. I do not like change, just like everybody else. There we go. Okay. One more PMP exam sample question for you. An agile leader has been assigned to an upcoming project to relocate an organization's manufacturing center out of state. The agile leader and product owner are concerned about resistance to the project, since it will require most employees to relocate to continue their employment. What is the agile leader's best approach to enabling this change? Is it A, empower the product owner to make decisions on how work will be performed? B, leverage effective change management to make the transition less stressful? C, have the affected employees vote for the change and make the decisions accordingly? Or D, develop appropriate KPIs, key performance indicators, and communicate them at the end of the sprint? Is it A, B, C, or D? Looking forward to your answers in the chat. 15 seconds, here we go. It looks like we have some sort of an agreement. We have a B, we have a B, we have another B, we have another B, Tony with a D. And yeah, the correct answer is, in fact, this time the majority is correct. It is B. We've just learned in the last 10 minutes, right? Change management is a structured approach for transitioning individuals, groups, and organizations from a current state to a desired future state. And given the broad impact on a large group of stakeholders, especially the employees here, the transition will likely be stressful. So effective change management may help alleviate stress. From a point and the perspective of the impact, right? This particular scenario, huge, right? Everybody has to move. Everybody has to sell their house, find a new place to rent, go into a different state, change their license plates, all of that, right? Humongously large change here in regards to this particular scenario, right? If we look at it from a more general point of view, projects by their nature drive change from a current to a future state, and to be successful as leaders in charge of implementing this change, we have to achieve the envisioned future state. The scenario described, absolutely significant in terms of impact on the organization's employees, right? This is going to cause considerable resistance to the project. I mean, come on, right? We're going to make everybody move. Yes, that's, yeah. Or else what? They lose their jobs? And talk about, yeah, this is going to cause resistance, right? A massive, major impact on everybody's life. And effective change management is likely going to be a critical factor in overcoming some resistance here, mitigating their stress, realizing the benefits, expecting from the project, right? Yes. And one thing to also point out at this moment here is change management is fundamentally different from change control, right? Change control is a process where modifications to identify project artifacts must be approved before implementation, whereas change management enables change to achieve the project's desired benefits, right? A little while ago here, we had the scenario where we talked about, you have to get approval to make a change to the risk register. That would be change control. Okay, that was the wrong answer back on that particular question, but that is change control, requiring an approval to make a change, whereas change management is to put the appropriate processes and the approach in place to make it so that the change can go through. Okay. Maybe one final thing before we move on here. If you're thinking that relocating an organization's manufacturing center as an agile project may be counterintuitive, yeah, well, agile projects, they are typically associated with knowledge work, software development, things like that. And whether this is the case or not, right, nothing prevents an organization from using agile methods to undertake other initiatives, such as this here, which, if you look at it from a high perspective, this seems more like a plan-driven approach, right? You plan this out years ahead, right? This is probably not just a 3-month project. This is a multi-year and multi-phase project, yeah, but nothing prevents us from doing that, right? Relocating organizational assets, a manufacturing center that we have described in this scenario here, to another location. Obviously, on such a project, these specific tasks performed by the agile leader, the team members, the product owner, and other stakeholders, they would be different from the roles that you would normally perform on a knowledge management project, right? Instead of developing software, the team will likely develop processes and procedures for the relocation. But however, the application of adaptive and agile project management best practices for the organizations, they would be similar to those that you apply on a software development project, right? So just because this seems more, traditionally more like, yeah, there should be a plan-driven project, doesn't mean you can't do it that way. Right, before we close this, please don't forget the PrepCast training course, of which this particular lesson here is a part, can be found at PMBOK.com, and the PrepCast Simulator with over 2,000 questions, 2,280, I believe, can be found at PMExamSimulator.com. The PrepCast teaches you what you need to know, and the simulator allows you to test before you get going on the actual exam day. Yeah, and with that, we are coming to a close. I have 3 take actions for you today. And you've already seen this one here. If you've watched the previous 2, it's the same take action every single time. I want you to download the PMBOK guide and review principles 9 to 12, the principles that we have talked about today. Each is only about 2 to 3 pages long, so it's a relatively easy read. You can download this on the PMI website. We have a redirect link, so pmprepcast.com/PMBOKDL. That's PMBOK download, PMBOK DL. You can get that there. You have to be a PMI member in order to download it. So if you're not a PMI member, strongly recommend that you become a member. And of course, please do read the article on which this particular lesson is based as a review there. But I do have 2 podcasts that I want to recommend to you as well. The first one is this here, episode 301. This one is with Dr. David Hilson, the risk doctor, managing the risks you didn't know you were taking. It looks at what product managers can do successfully on their projects in regards to risk management. pm-podcast.com/301. And then if you go to pm-podcast.com/468, this one is a really good interview. This one I can heartily recommend. This is about project management and the fact that it's change management. This is with Tim Creasy, and Tim is a real, he's really strong in change management, and we talk about change management for I think about 45 minutes, something like that, and you'll come out of this with a new view of how change management is, what change management is, and how to apply it, and all that. So really good interview right there. And now for the takeaways. Really 2 things from today's lesson. First of all, the 12 principles, and this is just a minor takeaway. The 12 principles that we've talked about, they're not really part of the PMBOK guide, because the 12 principles come to us from the ANSI standard for project management. They're in the book that's called the PMBOK guide, but they're in part 1 of that book, which is the ANSI standard. I know, picky, minor detail. Doesn't matter. We have to be precise here, right? And then second, the 12 principles cannot be looked at in isolation, okay? Each principle affects the others there. They're like this. They're integrated like a puzzle. Well, no, it's more like 3-dimensional chess, okay? If you tweak something over here, the team will fail. If you strengthen the team, your adaptability and resilience goes up, right? It's that kind of the butterfly effect that you simply want to be aware of. Yeah, and this is it. Thank you very much, everybody, for being with me today for this review of Principle 9 to 12 from the PMBOK Guide 7th edition. Well, the ANSI standard, which is in the PMBOK Guide 7th edition. Thanks for joining me. Until next time. But before you go, this lesson is part of a series in which I help you to be better prepared for your PMP exam. Please do visit pmprepcast.com/more to watch all of them.